When your development chairman Tom called me and said DeMatha wanted to present this medal to Paul posthumously, I asked, couldn't it be done in the spring or the fall? Tom said no, it had to be done during the week of St. John DeMatha feast day. I called Paul's cousin, Maureen, who lives in Anne Arundel County. She said, Betty, this is so special. This is such an honor for Paul. You have to come back from Florida for the presentation, and I will acknowledge the medal on behalf of the family. Well, two ironical things have happened. It's almost as cold in Florida this week as it is here. And Maureen can't acknowledge your gift to Paul because a very, very special friend of 42 years died this weekend, and their children are having their mom's funeral mass at this moment. So I will read Maureen's remarks and add some of my own. On behalf of Betty and dear friends who have joined us this morning, we thank you for honoring Paul Cinquegrana. I am Maureen Williams-Lasky, one of Paul's first cousins. Today I would like to share with you some conversations Paul and I have had through the years, and also give you two very special examples of how Paul approached life. One day, Paul began discussing his high school years. He told me the one achievement he cherished the most from attending DeMatha was that at graduation, he realized he had confidence in himself. I asked him, in what way? He said that one of his teachers, of course I don't remember the name, told him always to listen to others before you make a career decision, and then focus on that decision. After Paul said that to me, I realized that he always took that approach in life. Whenever I would see Paul, I realized that he always listened first and then focused on his decisions. Each of DeMatha's gentlemen and scholars sitting here today can also approach such success in life by having confidence in oneself and taking the same approach that my cousin Paul took. That is, listen and focus on your decisions. Paul's many loves included playing the stock market, where he was a numbers guy. He enjoyed traveling and voting. Naturally, he was happiest doing those activities with his family and friends. Paul's father was Italian, and his mother was Irish. My parents and Paul's mother were young when they came to America from Ireland. Many years later, my mother was in the Villa Rosa nursing home. I realized that Paul and Betty were very familiar with this Italian nursing home as they visited my mother, Paul's aunt, who was there. When I called Paul and told him that I was designated as the cannoli queen for the annual Villa Rosa event, he and Betty offered to help me make cannolis. My husband and I went over early to the nursing home and began baking cannolis and putting them in the refrigerator. When Paul arrived, he said, let's take the cannolis out of the refrigerator and let's make them out here in the open where everyone can see us. I think that will improve the sales. And he suggested 5 cannolis for $15, and the 6th one is free. Well, the word free is magical. We sold more cannolis than we ever imagined. Paul and Betty were with us every year, and Paul took great satisfaction in the amount of money that our groups collected. What amazed me was that towards the end of his life, Paul was still able to help us make cannolis. He could hold the cannoli and someone else squeezed the bag with the filling. Obviously, Paul thought and then focused on how he could help me. Another example of Paul's approach to life involved one of my sons. I may lose it at this point, but I'll try. Danny was 4 years old and he was diagnosed with leukemia. The oncologist gave him approximately 18 months to live. In those days, people stayed away from anyone who had cancer, but Paul was always available. One day, shortly before Christmas, Paul called and said there was going to be a surprise for Danny on Christmas Eve, to have the front door open and make sure that Danny was sitting nearby. With no clue as to what was coming, we were all in the living room. Even though Danny had a very high tolerance of pain, he was not feeling well that day. All of a sudden, I heard a fire truck coming down the street. Danny and I looked out and saw Santa Claus on top of the fire truck. The fire truck stopped in front of our house, and Santa came to the front door with a gift for a happy little boy. Santa Paul winked and got back on the fire truck. It was very clear that Paul had listened very carefully about the few months Danny had left to live, and he focused on Danny's happiness. Paul, DeMatha taught you well, you listened, you focused. And I would like to add, education is important. One's career is important, but it's also important to reach out to others, and I think that's what Maureen tried to tell you in her remarks. A couple of years ago, I received an invitation to attend a function here in the evening in the Antler Room. I had heard Paul and his friend Bob Saucer, a classmate, was here this morning, talk about the Antler Room, but I'd never been there. I parked in front of the school, was wandering around trying to find an open door. A student here was jogging that late afternoon, early evening, and stopped and asked if he could help. I said, yes, you can, I'm lost. Where is the Antler Room? He didn't tell me how to find it, he escorted me there. A small gesture, perhaps, but of great importance to me. Thank you, whoever that was. Paul loved being a student here. He loved being a business major in finance at the University of Maryland. And his friend and former dean of the business school, Rudy Lamone, is here today. Paul loved being a municipal bond broker and stockbroker. He loved making money, but he loved saving money more. Much to my chagrin, his favorite place to shop was Value City. From our first will and through some revisions, DeMatha was always one of the beneficiaries, and also the University of Maryland. And at that first session, we were preparing our wills and we were quite young. I said, what about my album on it? I went to Madison College, which is now James Madison. He said, okay, sure. I always respected Paul for respecting his wife's wishes. We didn't always agree, but sometimes. You've heard about the quote for Paul's yearbook pictures about investments in education pays off. So I thank you for honoring him for his investment in DeMatha.